A while back, Carol and I were talking about all the deaths that were happening in Anderson County and the problems that we were having. And she said she actually listened to me speak at a group, and then she came over the next day and sat down with me and said, you know, this is a problem that we need to start talking about. The deaths, the violence that's happening in our community, and she wanted it to be a United Way project. And I serve on the United Way board, and I think the ideas that Carol had of let's have some community topics on the drug addiction, on to mental health issues, conflict resolution, gang violence, and things that are happening in our community, we can come up with some ideas, get feedback from the community, and change the things in our community that are happening across Anderson County. It is a problem that one person, one group's not going to be able to fix. It's going to take all of us getting involved in our community to make a difference. Most of the stakeholders have been very engaged in what we're doing, and we appreciate that. It's also opened my eyes to groups that I didn't even know were out there serving our community, but those are the things that we're finding out. So as we continue this process, we're collecting that information so that we can follow back up with those that attend and come up with some ideas that we can change our community. South Carolina and Anderson County are really prospering with the economic things that are happening in our community, but these issues are headwinds that could stymie that growth. The Anderson County Chamber of Commerce has a drug task force program that they got kicked off about a year ago. If you're interested in working with that group, we meet once a month at the chamber. Just let me know and we'll certainly get you involved with that. Just a year and a couple of days ago, we suffered a serious tragedy up in Townville. That was the Townville Elementary School shooting. I certainly remember it vividly because September the 28th was my birthday, and last year I was planning on taking the day off and enjoying my birthday, and our world was turned upside down with what happened about lunchtime that day. And when you look at all of that incident and look at how it developed and what happened, those are things that can be prevented. That young boy went to the school and did a horrible act. Before he went there, he went home and shot his father, killed him, and then drove his dad's truck to the elementary school with the intention of causing harm to a lot of people. So those are the things that can happen in our own community. We're all scratching our head what happened in Las Vegas. That's still unfolding, but those are the kind of things that we need to start talking about and start dealing with, and see what we can do to make our community much better. So tonight we have some experts here that will talk. They will each come up and talk for 5 to 6 minutes and tell you some of the experiences and things that their organization does. We also have a facilitator with us that will come up after our speakers and start engaging questions. We want to get everyone's input and engaging conversations about this topic. So tonight we will hear from Dr. Jim Rosenberger, Family Counseling Center, Julie Meredith with Safe Harbor, DeAnna Luvene, the Parenting Place, Bobby Ritu with Man Up, Demika Patterson, Victim Advocate for the Anderson County Sheriff's Office, and I know our Sheriff and our Police Chief are here. We have our Councilman here, so we do have some leadership from our law enforcement organizations and our County Council, and we certainly appreciate y'all being here. Thank you. Sherwood Williams, Anderson County Alternative School, and formerly with Restoring Integrity Project with the DJJ. And so with that, we will go ahead and start. Jim will step up first, and we will rotate through our speakers. And then, of course, we have with us tonight, back again to be our moderator, Charles Weathers. Charles, will you stand up just a minute? We're glad to have you, but he'll be our moderator, and he will help us continue our conversation.
That is good. I think there should be a little clarification. I did work for DJJ, but what I've done is I've developed an organization in Anderson County, which is called the Restoring Integrity Project. And what it is, it's a batterer intervention program for individuals that have gotten arrested or they're going through the system with regards to domestic violence issues. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up. But as I was coming here and I was kind of thinking, what should I talk about? And one of the things that it's about conflict resolution, but just a little bit about myself. I've worked for the Federal Bureau of Prisons, so I have a law enforcement background. I've worked over the past 25 years. All I've done was deal with what I would describe as broken people, broken juveniles as well as broken adults. So most recently, I do work, in addition to the Restoring Integrity Project, I also work for the Anderson County Alternative School. And at the Anderson County Alternative School, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with the whole makeup of the Anderson County Alternative School. We service all of Anderson County, each school district, which is, as you may know, 5. And one of the things that I feel truly blessed to be in this position of working with these kids, because what I've started to realize is that intervention is far more important than anything else. Prior to that, I worked for the juvenile justice system, and it gave me the opportunity to deal with kids that have already done something wrong. But right now, I'm actually dealing with the kids, hopefully before they can become a part of the system. But one of the things that I thought about coming here, I thought about a quote. And the quote goes like this. It says, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy." That's the bottom line. The bottom line is that we're dealing with individuals, both adult as well as juveniles, that have a problem with handling conflict on the most basic levels. And I have to apologize because I have to leave because I have to go to a domestic violence class in Greenville, so I have to be there at 7. So I hope all the law enforcement officers are here so they don't stop me or anything. But we live in a society where we gravitate toward comfort. We gravitate toward convenience. We gravitate toward things that are good for us. But the true test is where we stand when things aren't going our way. And if you look at domestic violence, if you look at problems in the schools, if you look at society in general, we're doing a poor job of handling conflict or handling things when they don't go our way. It's just that simple. The kids at the alternative school are great. The guys that are in my domestic violence program are great. But the time when they're not great is when you tell them that you can't come here today, or you tell them something that they don't want to hear. So if we as a society could handle conflict more, or better yet, if we could pass it along to our grandchildren, our children, that things aren't always going to go our way, we need to be able to handle the stressful situations, and some of us are great at handling stressful situations, and therefore that makes us a productive member of society. But the problem is when we do run into that challenge. And that's when you talk about law enforcement, I admire law enforcement because I know that they have this hard job to deal with people when things aren't convenient for those people. So the problem is, again, at the risk of sounding redundant, the problem is when people can't handle the conflict or they can't handle a situation that doesn't benefit them. And all of us, we have to ask ourselves the same question. How am I handling situations that don't benefit me? So at the risk of not taking up all your time, I just wanted to just kind of give you food for thought where do we stand? Because ultimately, we are in the community, and how do we handle the conflict that we deal with? Political conflict, domestic conflict, whatever. A lot of us are doing a poor job of handling conflict. And if we can just understand that life is not supposed to, or life is not designed to give us what we want, so there are going to be those instances where life doesn't give us what we want, and we have to appropriately work through that. I have a lot of guys who are in the program in Greenville, not in Anderson, I'm trying to work on that, but in Greenville, and it's amazing when you break down the importance of integrity. I preach integrity, and a lot of these guys are dumbfounded that they didn't know the importance of integrity all along. And you know what integrity is? Integrity is doing the right thing in spite of the circumstances. We are living in a society where integrity is becoming less and less and less. But if we could preach, if you guys can preach integrity like I preach integrity, I think we can create a better society. So that, I apologize for having to leave. I'd love to stay here, but I got to go and teach a class. But thank you very much for having me, and look forward to talking to you later. Thank you.
Despite what the sign says, no, I am not a doctor. I have a brother that's a doctor. I have a father that's a doctor. I'm just Jim. I've been at the Family Counseling Center since 2001. And the Family Counseling Center is on the south side of Anderson, and typically during the daytime hours we do just regular counseling, marriage counseling, counseling children, individuals with any number of problems, and then we moonlight into a program that I'm proud of. I think we've done some decent stuff with it over the years. It's called the STEER, Striving to End Abusive Relationships. Our primary population is batterers of domestic violence. When Carol came to me about conflict resolution, that is a primary focus we do. And we've been doing it, I've been doing it since 2001, and I think we've been doing it much longer before that. But I want to run you back just a little bit before, as I've also done DSS work for 3 different states. And when I moved down to South Carolina, I left High Point, North Carolina. If anybody knows High Point, it's a little larger city than Anderson. It's a little larger county than Anderson. And I have a brother-in-law that was a law enforcement up there. In May of 1998, he calls me up and he says, you know, we just had our first homicide. And I thought, wow, we just had our 10th homicide in a county half the size of his. County half the size. And I thought, we're a little more violent down here in Anderson. And I started noticing it as I did my DSS work and then got my master's degree and went to the family counseling. I just noticed there's a lot of poor conflict management skills. There's a lot of fighting. I coach sports also. And one of the most disturbing things is seeing the values that our children have from their parents over how to get through a problem. And kids are church league basketball. It is a violent sport, and I'm thinking this is not right. And I played for like 6 different churches. I think I'm every denomination you can be, and I thought this is what our kids are being taught, and so we have a very hard uphill battle with our guys that come into domestic violence. They don't want to be there. They do not want to be there. And it's very similar to if I was to go to one of you and walk into your job situation and say, listen, wait, let me do your job. You obviously don't know what you're doing. Let me show you what you need to do. You would resist that greatly. And what one, Sherwood gave you a couple words, and Sherwood and I have known each other for years also. We do the same thing. I do it at a little bit bigger scale, but I found that it comes down to the one word of control. If I am raised as a child and things happen to me as a child that remove my control away from me, I'm going to spend my days trying to find control. And one of the hardest things to do is get these guys to come in and own up. It's okay not to be in control, because control is the major word that a child. You throw another word in there with power and control too. It's very similar words. Control is a major factor for these guys. They come in and certainly I think I've got more issues than they have. And they find that they can't control me, and we lose literally 50% of the guys from the time they are charged with domestic violence and referred to us until they finish the 26-week program. 50% of the guys do not make it. They can't handle that control. They can't handle giving up control. And we're okay with that. We understand those are some of the numbers. Those are the numbers that go back to law enforcement, go back to the solicitors, go back to the probation and things like that. It is it give you a little bit of the scope of the problem. As I came into town and started doing the domestic violence program, I started running it in 2003, and we had a nice, pretty group of about 18 to 20 guys a week. And I thought, you know, my days at DSS says there's more problems than this in Anderson County. So I went back to my boss and I said, listen, we're going to run this group. And I went to the probation office, we're doing this group. And I went to pretrial intervention, we're going to do this group. And I went to lawyers, and I went to judges, and I went to churches. And in 5 years' time, we're doing 180 people a week. And most of those are mandated, which means somebody's telling them they have to go. Nobody in the county knew that even existed. Well, what do you do over there? What do you do? Well, we do domestic violence counseling. But then as we started getting better, I realized domestic violence is not the problem. Domestic violence is not the problem. What are the problems that lead to the domestic violence? That's what Sherwood was talking about. The problems that lead to the domestic violence, the low self-esteem, the lack of control, the history of abuse, substances, all kinds of things lead. And one of the things I found is and I've been saying this since way back before I even got to counseling, and this is one-sided because I'm this side, but we're not raising our boys to be men. We're allowing our boys to stay boys. And how do boys handle conflict management? Fight, threaten, or run. And that's what we see as grown men. And it's a very big issue for me. And I got my motion to start moving. But one of the things I've noticed in the last 2 to 3 years I started doing as a counselor there, not the domestic violence, I'm getting in some of the nastiest custody fights I've ever seen. Lawyers and judges are referring me to help make some decisions over custody, and then how to teach two people that are separating how to be partners over children. And man, let me tell you what, I'll take the domestic violence guys any day over these parents. It is some of the nastiest conflicts that I have ever seen, and they're willing to go to an extent. So yes, it is a big issue for me. We've been working on this thing for almost 20 years, and I'm pleased when Carol came to me and said this is my community. Anderson is my community. I grew up here, I was raised here, came back here, raised my son here, and every bit of this Anderson community is affected by this problem and the other 3 issues that were going on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. I'm Julie Meredith. I'm the Director of Programs with Safe Harbor. We offer services to domestic violence victims and their children in actually the 4-county area of not only Anderson County, but also Pickens, Oconee, and Greenville counties as well. We run 3 shelters as well as a counseling program, advocacy and support for victims and their kids. And then a lot of good prevention and outreach services about the issue of domestic violence in our communities as well. So when I think about conflict resolution and how it connects to the work that we do, I think about our prevention program first. We have a prevention program in middle schools and high schools throughout the upstate that we call REP. It stands for the Relationship Education Project. And we see it as primary prevention because not only are we talking about the warning signs of abuse in a relationship and how to stay safe, but we're really talking about what a healthy relationship looks like. And one of the big skills that we're teaching and facilitating through that class is conflict resolution, healthy communication, and really what that looks like and how essential those pieces are to having a healthy partnership with somebody else in a dating relationship and then on in adulthood into marriage. And one of the things that our educators talk about so much is in order to have healthy conflict resolution, in order to be able to disagree with your partner, you have to mutually respect that person. There has to be mutual respect in that relationship in order for conflict resolution to happen. And I think that's where what's so key in thinking about domestic violence and how it relates to conflict resolution, because as everyone else has shared so far, in a situation of domestic violence, mutual respect is not present. As you had just shared, Jim, domestic violence at its core is all about power and control. And I think oftentimes we have this misnomer in our society thinking of domestic violence as an isolated incident that might happen in a relationship where maybe both people in the relationship were fighting, things got out of control, maybe there's a blame on both sides. But truly, when there is one person in this relationship that is exerting power and control and domination over a period of time, you can understand how that other victim in the relationship doesn't have the ability to think about how to resolve those issues. They don't have the choice to be able to do that. A lot of victims of domestic violence will compare being in an abusive relationship to walking on eggshells. You can do everything in your power to keep those shells from cracking, but they are still going to break, always. And so I always think about an example of conflict resolution. Oftentimes we might think in a relationship, we think about couples counseling as an example. A lot of times, couples counseling might be something in many situations that's seen as a great next step for a couple or two spouses that are dealing with some struggles in their relationship. In many ways, that might be very helpful in many relationships, but in domestic violence, it can be, unfortunately, a very dangerous situation for that victim in the midst of that relationship. Think about being in a counseling session with somebody who has power and control over you and being able to be forthright and honest in that session obviously would not be a possibility for that victim. If anything, it could be used as another tactic for that abuser to gain and maintain even more power and control in the relationship. So I think about how this issue certainly connects to the work that I do at Safe Harbor, and I think about the issue of domestic violence as a societal issue as a whole. And I think overall, if we as community members can understand some of the differences between conflict and control, or even disagreeing in a healthy way, or diminishing someone's self-worth, or truly diminishing their ability to make their own choices. When we understand the differences between those things, I think there's so much more that we can do as a whole community to understand this issue, hopefully to hold perpetrators accountable for their actions, and also to provide victims and their families with the support and resources they need to be believed, to be trusted, and then to be able to move forward. Thank you all.
Hello, I'm DeAnna Luvene from Parenting Place. I know y'all say, what is Parenting Place? Because we are a very small organization that's based out of Pickens County. We do serve the 4 upstate regions. We do Pickens, Oconee, Greenville, and Anderson. Actually, I do Anderson because I live in Anderson and this is my community. I'm one of their counselors there and victim advocates that we are all trained to be there. We do in-home counseling, so that kind of is a need in our community. That takes away the issue of I can't get to see somebody. We also do one-on-one parenting, if that's where our parents and our clients need to be. Our counselors go in and do that one-on-one. I think that's very important when it comes to conflict resolution, to start teaching your kids at a young age how to deal with things when they're told no. I've got grown kids, I still tell them no. And sometimes they don't deal with that the best way. So it's one of those talking situations that we walk through with them and help them teach their children. We also have another program that goes in with our parents who are pregnant or have birth to age 3 children that teach them developmental skills and progress and development in the areas they need to be. I feel like that's important with conflict because they need to be developing the appropriate skills at the appropriate level, so when they get to be in high school, they have those skills they need to be able to say, okay, wait a minute, let me take a break. So that's kind of where we are. And I can think, because I just left the house of a victim before I came here. This victim was told not to press charges because it would influence her custody of her children. She had bruises from the conflict. So now I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do I build this lady up for her children, help her children repair from the conflict and learn that I can't do this, that I need a healthier relationship. And she sticks in my mind because she is one of the ones that we have served that is in great need of a therapist that can come into the home and say, you're okay. This is what you need to do to be safe. This is how you can do a no contact order. This is how your children are safe. So those are some of the things we do. But with the parenting piece, I feel it's really important that we are active parents and we are teaching our community and our parents how to deal with that conflict, how to talk to your children about what you see on TV every day, not just mass shootings, but the commercials, the cartoons, the movies, the Law and Order, all of that stuff in general, they're taking in. The YouTube videos that our teens watch, all that they're taking in, but they don't necessarily know how to process that information into a healthy way. So that's kind of where we're at with it.
How's everybody doing? Good. All right. So my name is Bobby Ratu. I'm part of a grassroots effort called Man Upstate. Quick background about myself. I was a journalist for many years, now serve as a communicator, storyteller for a lot of large healthcare systems and nonprofits. And through that, Man Upstate has become an initiative that we support Safe Harbor, who created the initiative a few years ago. So what is Man Upstate? It's a group of men in the upstate of South Carolina with a very simple goal: growing good men. What does it mean to create really good men? And so I've got two sets of statistics for you real quick to kind of put some context behind this. First, according to the City of Anderson Municipal Court, there were 190 domestic violence arrests from July 1, 2015 to June 30th, 2016, so that fiscal year. That's roughly 3.65 domestic violence arrests per week in the City of Anderson. So I want you to think about that just for a second. So let's ask ourselves, where are the good men? Where's the opportunity? Where are the good men? Here's a second quote I would like to read to you. This is from a really smart man named Tony Porter, who leads an initiative called A Call to Men, who is currently helping the NFL with a lot of their domestic issues. He says this: the statistics show that only 15% of men are abusive or violent towards women. Think about that, 15%. And yet 1 in 3 women will be victims of abuse during their lifetime. So how can we, as the 85% of those good men, be a part of the solution? So what I bring to you today is talking about the opportunity. The opportunity when we're trying to look at issues of domestic violence are about conflict. They come down to very simple issues. And if you really want to drill it down even further, how does conflict arise? It really comes to the idea of lack of language. Really understanding the proper words or the proper communication skills at which to have a conversation. And so the opportunity is to teach people or teach boys and young men the proper language at which to have a conversation, at which to get outside of what we call the man box. So we all know the man box. We've seen the man box. We watch football. We watch soccer. We all watch the box that we stand in. We were culturally created to think this way. And let's talk about that real quick. So the man box is very simple. We men don't cry. Very simple. We just don't cry. We don't show cry. We don't express weakness or fear. We demonstrate power and control over women. We are aggressive. We do not like to be called a woman. We do not like to be used on the football field to say, "Quit acting like a sissy," or a woman, or "Take that skirt off." We don't like that. We are tough, we're athletic, we're strong, we're courageous. We can make good decisions and we don't need help. And we view women as property and objects. So the objectification of it. And so when we talk about how to look at domestic violence and being better men, we have to have the language at which to understand how we as men are the perpetrators. Let's admit it, we are the problem. So how can we move from the 15% to the 85% to be good men? And that's the goal. So Man Upstate has a goal to engage men across the upstate to have a conversation of what it looks like to raise good men. And I'm going to leave you with a story in the hope that it will spur more conversation and questions here. So many of you know Figs downtown. How many know Figs? I love Figs. I drink coffee there a lot. Mr. Jimmy has a lot of my money because I give it to him. One morning I was sitting in Figs, having my coffee, sitting, playing on my laptop, doing some work, and I look and I see a lady walking up the street and two guys coming from a different direction. And I look up for a second and I notice that the two men are catcalling her. You know, they're screaming out, talking to her. They're trying to make some sort of communication, and I watched it. And as they went by, you could tell she was uncomfortable. You know, she didn't like it too much, so she crossed the street. Well, they continued. You know, they continued their antics. And eventually what happened was is she found her way into a store and moved on. But the gentlemen kept on like smacking each other on the back and feeling good about themselves because that's what they did. They were in the man box for a second. But here's the biggest problem with that situation. I sat and watched it. I didn't do anything because I didn't have the language at which to step outside and say something to those individuals. So the call for Man Upstate is to inspire young men and good men to change the culture, to create language at which they can use to not only not make those catcalls, but also to call out the men that are making those catcalls and say that's inappropriate. That's the whole mission, and I hope that we can talk more about it. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Demika Patterson, and I am one of two victim advocates at the Anderson County Sheriff's Office. We provide services to Anderson County as well as 5 different municipalities to include Belton, Pendleton, Williamston, Pelzer and West Pelzer, and Iva. So, of course, when the conflict is not resolved and people don't have those good conflict resolution skills, they end up getting a phone call from our office. So, with those victims, if they are victims of crime, our goal is to help them to be able to cope with the traumatic process that they've been through, whether it's an assault and battery, a physical trauma, or whether it's a property crime and their home's been violated and their whole sense of, you know, safety has been violated. We're there to assist them. We make referrals to some of these other agencies that are up here represented, but we do whatever it takes to help offer emotional support or whatever supports they need to navigate the criminal justice process. The majority of our victims that we provide services for are domestic violence victims. We do see that a lot. We see male and female victims. So some people may think that it's a problem simply just with the males, but there are a lot of females, you'd be surprised, who are also offenders with domestic violence. But some of the things that we will assist with are completing applications for assistance from the State Office of Victims Assistance to help pay for some medical expenses or funeral expenses, things of that nature, non-property associated with. We assist with completing orders of protection, finding a shelter if they need shelter, or referring to counseling services if they need that as well. Let's see. We act as a liaison with our officers and detectives to kind of help them understand what's going on with their case, to keep them up to date with their case. And we're just there for the victims. We're there to serve them, to do whatever they need to help make the process easy for them. They've already been traumatized, and our goal is to assist them in that time when they feel like they need somebody the most. They usually remain with the sheriff's office for about 2 to 3 weeks on our caseload, and then after that time, they get a victim advocate with the solicitor's office. And the solicitor's office will, they have 4 advocates at that office, and they provide the same services that we offer as well. So mine is short and sweet, so maybe y'all have some questions here in just a little bit, but that's my role as the victim advocate at the sheriff's office.
All right, at this time, we'll have Charles to come up and be our facilitator. Our solicitor came in after I did introductions, so David Wagner's here with us, and we want to get our elected officials certainly engaged with us tonight.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Let me set the stage for the conversation going forward. There's a microphone over here in a second. I'll step from behind the podium and I'll grab that microphone and walk around the audience to get your questions. Let's be forward-focused, solution-oriented. Let's be innovative. Let's talk about why we're here this evening, what solutions we can find, how we can work better together, what we can do as a community to really address some of the issues and challenges we talked about today. The panelists will entertain your questions. We really want to get as much as we can out of the next half hour or so. So here's your time to put anything on the table that we can discuss to really help us continue to improve the community, okay? So,
thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here this evening. I know Julie and Bobby, and we worked on some domestic violence things before, and I thank you for what you do. And I know they're working in the schools to try and do some prevention, and so is Foothills Alliance, and I think maybe another group. So that's a good start. But I think something Jim kind of touched on a while ago is important. Everything that you do, all the jobs you do up here are important because you have the victims out there, or the patients, whatever you want to call them. They have to be taken care of. But what do we do for prevention? How far back do you go? Jim was kind of getting to that arena. There are so many things back in these young people's lives that create the problems down the road. And being on county council, I can trace so many problems in Anderson County. One, to a lack of education. We have the jails are full of people. We have gang activity. We have drug abuse. We have crime. We have domestic abuse. My question, and I don't know who might want to take it, but I'll put it in the terms of kind of like peeling an onion back. I would ask all of you, and I would do this many times over, why? You tell me, why do we have these problems in the first place? And I don't know if anybody wants to address this or not, but I'm going clear back to when the child is born.
thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anybody want to tackle that? Why?
I can give you one answer. I don't have the answer, I have one answer. And as I talked to Carol about some of these problems, again, you mentioned the 4 things that we brought to the table in the last month and a half and the next couple of weeks, is I believe personally is our young people that are having children have no concept how to put good values into those kids. And I certainly believe parenting is a major, major, major issue. Not just teaching a couple how to get a kid to school, not teaching a couple how to change a diaper, but teaching a couple what is truly important. As Sherwood got up here and said, integrity. What are our kids teaching these kids? And I you know, we have started a parenting program. We have the parenting place here. I really believe that's one of the bigger keys. Now I'll go to another factor that I tried to do a few years ago, and to be honest with you, this is one of the most resistant things I ran into. And it's not preventing it from ever happening, but it's preventing it from clogging the system, which is how do I get these people into my office to do, and our domestic violence program, we push healthy people, healthy relationships, and then there is no domestic violence. And so how do I get them before the domestic violence happens? And I went to the churches. I went to a lot of churches. And we don't have that problem, man. We don't have that problem. We got good people here.
Just stay away from those church basketball games.
Oh, my. Church basketball. But, and I was a little frustrated because I really set apart a goal. How do we get people before they get charged? And I got a ton of resistance. And to this day, I'm still, our group has dropped from 180 guys a week to 50. Does that mean domestic violence is getting better? No, it's not getting better. He mentioned a stat for the city. The stat for the city is I don't remember the numbers for the city. The county, I look at the arrest records every morning on the county. There's 35 guys a month getting arrested that I can keep up with. Some of them get out before I can see the thing. How do I get those guys before they get there? And certainly one of the things we do, and I know these other groups here are going to do, Safe Harbor's doing that in the parenting places, can we get the children of these guys? Can we get the children of these women? Can we get, and again, the parents may not can get some parenting, but can they get better parenting from the community? And I believe so. I really believe so.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Before I came to the sheriff's office, I worked at Honeypath Middle School. And I have a child of my own, but I also have thousands of children that have come through Honeypath Middle School over the past 10 years. But I feel like the parents, of course, need some help and support, but it's all of our responsibilities in the community because children are watching us all the time. And they're at school more than they're at home. And they're doing outside activities and they have other influence. So I think it's important for all of us, if you see something that needs to be corrected, don't be afraid to say something to that child. It's all of our responsibilities to help shape or mold these children and these boys and these girls and the men and women. It's everybody's responsibility to help play that role in that. So I think we all need to remember it takes a village to raise a child. And so I have no problem seeing a young man or young girl that's out of line and letting them know. And then I also don't have a problem with if there's an adult that's out of line, letting them know. We've got to respect the kids and let them know we care. And so I think it's everybody's responsibility to help work on some of these issues.
And I completely agree with what both of you said. And just to think around layers of prevention, when we started our prevention program at Safe Harbor years ago, it was called the Megan Project. And we went into high schools, we did a one-time presentation, and it was valuable, but it really was more awareness of what is a worst case scenario, what dating violence potentially could be. What we found over time is that what is really effective, and studies show, is how can we get before that? How can we really talk about what is healthy in a relationship, what students do need to know, hopefully even before they are in any type of dating or intimate partner relationship, what those healthy behaviors look like. And so that's kind of when we started developing REP and a multi-session curriculum, and then also recognizing who's really our target audience. We still work with high schools, but we've moved into more and more middle schools, realizing that younger ages are really our target audience. When we are able to talk with students at an earlier age about what they deserve in a relationship, what they need to be as a partner, is a huge, huge piece. But what we've also found along with that is there's layers that go along with those folks that are supporting our students. As you all had shared, talking with parents about what they do need to know and working with students to foster those healthy relationships. Talking with other people in the school systems, coaches and educators and others who are influencing students' lives and acting as an important role model for them to help model those behaviors are incredibly important. So those are things I would add.
Boys in the schoolyard fighting now. They're saying the girls are kind of scary as well. Can somebody speak to any trends you're seeing here, or even law enforcement in the audience, what you're seeing?
That is true. I have witnessed many fights working in a middle school. Of course, you know, there are hormones everywhere, and there are a lot of fights. And so I think girls and females are becoming a little bit more aggressive, in my opinion. I'd break up a boy fight any day before I stepped in to break up a girl fight. So I have been really, really surprised at the increase of female offenders with my domestic violence victims. I've been very surprised with more males coming in who have been, victims. So I'm not sure what to do about that or what's causing that, or, I don't know what it is, but I do believe it's a trend that we are seeing.
Any other questions, comments? Anything you want to share? Carol, did you have something?
Well, I was going to say I'm really happy to see the solicitor and the police chief, and I thought the sheriff was here. But anyway, to say though that they are facing these kinds of issues every day as they do their job, and the police officers as they handle the calls that they have, and I guess I just want to put them on the spot and ask them to talk a little bit about the things that they're seeing from day to day, and especially, I mean, I know the police, they arrest people, they ultimately get to the solicitor's office, and David is fairly new at being the solicitor, but he's been in the solicitor's office for years. And I'm putting them on the spot to say, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing.
Thank you, Ms. Burdette, and I'll just share with you a little bit about the city. Introduce both my captains are back here with me today. Captain Mike Bracone, he's over special operations, everything not to do with patrol. Others, Captain Mike Higgins, he's over all our uniformed personnel, patrol division. What are we doing in the city as a success? And some of you know about it, some of you don't. About 2 years ago, we decided right shortly after Ferguson that we would create a law enforcement community task force. A little over 2.5 years now. Our main focus has been to hit the kids. I've heard that said, some of our problems are the adults, but what we're doing is focusing on the kids. We've been to every elementary school, all the way to the high schools, West Side, Hannah, alternative school. The kids were more honest there than they were at any school about what's going on in our community. In fact, one said, why are you here? Why are you writing this down? Because if you're not going to do anything about it, you're wasting our time today. And I was honest. I told them, I said, if we're writing it down today, we will do something about it. And some were the teaching methods, and we got that Mr. Dillingham at alternative school. You know, it started out real simple. What we've done more than anything, we've touched about 5,000 kids, I think. Ice cream with a cop. We go to churches. We have this task force. We have probably about 10 of the ministers, African American ministers, that are on our task force. And when we get our message to them, they're talking to hundreds. That's really benefited the city. The very first one we went to was a group like this. Dr. Williams at St. Paul, he asked me to come down, sit up front because you're going to be talking. So what I did, I went and sat right in the middle of the kids. Kind of got a little loud there for a little while because the police were sitting with the kids. And the kids were very standoffish. Both my captains will tell you this. So when we first get there, very standoffish. By the time we're leaving, they play in our cars. We get to talk with them, coloring books, give them some ice cream. And by the time we're leaving, when I try to walk off, they're dragging my feet, not wanting us to leave. So our thing in the community is we want kids to see us, you know, as role models. Not be afraid to come see us, talk to us, have that kind of rapport. This past year, District 5, we're very fortunate. All the schools in the city has an SRO now, and nobody shares an SRO anymore. So that's been a big benefit. Partnerships in the city, we are partnered with the DEA. We have a full-time officer with the DEA now. We have a part-time officer with alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And we are looking at doing our third federal partnership with Secret Service as a task force officer. I'm not saying we can't always work with our solicitor, but sometimes we try to get people on federal charges too. And that is a big step. Just bragging on the city. And I know the stats for the whole county are way off from what we have here in the city. The city's a lot smaller. We finished this past year with 1 homicide, and we signed a warrant on that individual. That was big for us. All of our crimes are down right now, from violent crime to burglary to car break-ins, white-collar crime. They're all down from previous years. And that's just the hard work from our officers, detectives, narcotics, everybody. So my other hat, because I got 2 church members in here. My other hat is I'm an elder in my church. And I'll share this with you. And I agree. God is not part of this picture. And it has to be more. Very simple word, joy. Just remember that word. Jesus first, others second, yourself last. If we all did that, it'd be a lot different.
Yeah, I'm David Wagner. Excuse me, I'm a solicitor here. Usually by the time we get to where there's been a problem with conflict resolution skills, it's gotten bad enough to where it's gone to court. A lot of what we do is basically try to, I don't want to say punish, you're talking about seeking justice for the victim in some of these cases. In all the cases, we're also trying when we can to steer them in a way where they're not going to do it again. They're going to be, there's programs that we've got. We've got 2 programs here at Anderson. One of them is Jen's program, the steer program. A lot of the first-time people that are first-timers, they're going through that. We make that a condition of their charge and what our recommendation is as far as what their sentence might be, what their outcome of their case might be, that they go and complete it. And I think that's we've been successful with that. I think they do a great job down there. We've got another program in Oconee that does the same thing, different name. So there's ways to go about trying to keep, sometimes these things from happening again. I do think there's a certain segment of the population, and I can't give you a percentage, but some of those people are just, whether it's ingrained genetically in them, whether it's and probably it's a combination of a lot of them, whether it's their upbringing that we've talked about here too, where they don't have the background, they don't have the parenting in their background, they've not been disciplined growing up, they've had no role models to look up to, no father figure, no mother to tell them, right from wrong. All those things combined into to where these people, when they get stressed and when things happen, they're going to react violently, and that's basically what we end up with, and we see the end result of that in court. And lots of times you're not going to stop that all. You can educate people, all of them. There's going to be a certain segment they're going to do it, and that's just the way they react. I think it's just ingrained, and it's not a lot of them, but a lot of them I think can be helped, can be stopped when we do get back to the churches, we do get back to the parenting and doing and directing a lot of these kids. A lot of them are second, third generation this way, and that's we've had their parents in court, we've had their brothers and sisters. Lots of times it's a family problem there, and that's the hardest thing to fix. And I do think some of the ideas that are thrown out here is the way to go. I mean, I think churches are big, obviously, and I think parents, anybody that can guide these kids, mentors, steer program, things like that. But all those things I think are going to help in the long run. But one of the things we've done a little different, and it wasn't so much our idea, it actually came from the governor's office. When Governor Haley was in there, they allocated, in the legislature, they allocated enough money to where every county can have a domestic violence prosecutor to handle even the lower level ones. So what we're doing in Anderson now that's different than it's been done in the past is we bring all the cases, whether there should be in summary court or city court or general sessions. They all come to general sessions court now, and we've got 2 people in the office that handle those, specifically domestic violence. So we're getting a prosecutor in on some of these cases a lot earlier than we might have before. And it's too early to tell how much that's going to help because it's only been going on since probably March. But I do think it'll have an effect, at least as far as our prosecution, whether we get people involved with the STEER program and other avenues like that to try to teach these people that you don't have to resort to violence and you don't have to resort to what they do. Because the end result is if it escalates even more, the penalties increase based on the severity. And they revamped all the domestic violence laws a few years back, and a lot of them are a lot more serious now. The penalties go up to 20 years on some of them, which is no parole time, on some of the worst cases. So, does that answer your question, Carol? Or?
David, South Carolina was leading the way in domestic violence across the nation. Have we seen any improvement in that, or are we still?
I don't know what the facts are, Greg, as far as the figures, but I think we are seeing improvement. And I think it's become enough at the forefront from the governor's office all the way down. I know here in the city, the chief, he spent a lot of years doing those domestic violence cases as an investigator because I worked with him on a lot of those. And also here in the city, he's got that background to where he knows, and I think that's a good thing. Sheriff McBride was here earlier. He had to leave. He's had something he had to go to too. But I know they've got some good detectives working out there too. And all the cases don't get charged. There's lots of times, these officers go out and they're a high risk volatile situation, and they don't always come to charges. Lots of times it's diffused and they keep the peace and people move on.
And Greg, I think if I read correctly, and someone else may have seen this in the newspaper, I think it was just in the last few days, that we are now number 5 in the nation versus number 1. Is that correct, Julie?
That's been correct for the past 2 years. So we've been in the top 10 for that statistic since it's been kept, but we tend to bounce around. We've been in the top 5 in the nation for women killed by men for the past 6 years. So, but I know. Yeah. Well, I definitely think it goes back to looking at domestic violence truly as this pattern of power and control. So talking with students, oftentimes just helping them to understand what's healthy in a relationship. We're talking a lot about healthy boundaries. So when you're in a healthy relationship, that shouldn't keep you from being able to hang out with friends. Oftentimes a warning sign for an abusive relationship is that isolation, perhaps, from friends and family, that sense of, I've got to spend 24/7 with this person. It may be that quick access to being aware of where that person is all the time. We talk a lot about technology nowadays and how that plays such a large role with cell phones and social media. And when your partner is telling you that they need to know where you are and what's going on, 600 text messages a day, or asking for your password for your Facebook or your Instagram or your Snapchat, there's definitely, those are all signs of power and control in a relationship. Oftentimes, and we talk about this too, that idea of sending pictures, and we've all heard that term sexting at this point, plays a huge role. That idea of somebody that is, we think of sexual abuse as perhaps in a very narrow way, but sexual coercion nowadays is coming through many, many different forms, including technology. So that idea of a young student who is feeling that sense of, gosh, I'm with somebody who's telling me to do something, and maybe I'm obligated to do this. Oftentimes thinking about those subtle things that may be going on in a relationship, that it's not physical abuse, it's not that somebody's getting hit or getting pushed down the stairs, but it's about those subtle signs of slowly gaining and maintaining more power and control in a relationship. And we know that students, I think statistics show that young women actually between the ages of 16 to 24 are at the most vulnerable age for experiencing abuse in a relationship. So we often think of this as an adult issue, but it truly is happening with our young people and with young boys as well, potentially being in abusive relationships, as you mentioned too. That it's something that oftentimes our young people are most vulnerable to, because they are looking for that love in a relationship, and maybe oftentimes not knowing what does healthy look like, especially if coming from a home where that has not been modeled or not been expressed as to what they deserve.
So I think it's appropriate that I speak about this, because I'm 43. I have a 6-year-old, but I have newborn twins, newborn twin boys. And so one of the biggest things in my life is how do I raise 2 good young men? And how do I keep my daughter from watching the crazy mess that goes on in television? And I think a lot of it comes down to a few things. One is mentorship. How do I learn how to be a good dad? Well, I seek other people to find that opportunity. Is it my father? Is it men in my community? And so I think the opportunity is, how can we invest as a community in teaching men how to raise men and girls? That's a big opportunity, I think. How can we do that? Second is really understanding what it means to love, as opposed to, I was raised by a military man. Everything was cut and dry. I had to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was very rigid schedule. I was very fearful of my father. Now, I love my dad, but I was. And so I have to think through in my brain, how do I want to raise my boys in a way that shows love and compassion, that I'm approachable, that we can talk about those issues when it comes to what do we watch on the iPad. And then if they do watch it, let's talk about it instead of pushing it aside. When my daughter sees Law and Order when I happen to have it on and someone's smacking someone, let's talk about that. At the same time, when she sees a football game and asks, can I play that sport? So those are opportunities. So it's all about, once again, I go back to language. How can we have conversations? How can we have active conversations?
Charles, we want to thank you for helping facilitate our night. We want to thank our panelists for being here, especially those that came out tonight. At this time, Carol's going to come up and give us some closing remarks. She is the director of the United Way.
Tonight's conversations could not be at a more timely time. We've just experienced the first anniversary of the Townville shooting. We've seen over and over again this week the shocking massacre in Las Vegas. It reminds us that we live among and see on a daily basis those that are suffering with turmoil within themselves that most of us in this room probably cannot even begin to understand. But at United Way, one of our goals is that we want everyone in Anderson County to feel that they live in a safe place. That safety starts in our homes, with our families. So many times we hear on the news about the violence within our Anderson County homes that end up in tragedy, where Chief Steward or Sheriff McBride or their folks will be called out. And unfortunately, many times, the coroner will be one of the ones that will be with them. Next, from the family piece, we go to our neighborhoods. We want our neighborhoods to be safe. It is so refreshing to hear from Chief Steward that in the city of Anderson that all crime is down. That should be something that we are celebrating. It's taken a lot of hard work and innovation. That's what we need. In fact, as we kicked off these conversations, we were at a reception honoring the chief, the mayor, the city manager, and Council member Beatrice Thompson, because they had a vision of doing something that was innovative to help. And as we look at beyond our neighborhoods, we look at the community as a whole, and I always say Anderson County is our community. And we want Anderson County to be a safer place. So we don't want a child walking out in their neighborhood on a sidewalk and being hit by a stray bullet by someone, maybe not even intending to hit them. We're looking for you and others of the people that we know in this county to raise your hand and say, I want to make a difference. I want to make Anderson County safer. I want to fight against the violent behavior. I want to be part of the solution. So tonight, as we end this conversation, and although we did not have as many people tonight, the meaningful conversation we've had, I think, was maybe the best of the three thus far. And for that, I want to thank you. Greg, thank you for your leadership. I want to thank our board of directors at United Way for allowing us to move in this direction. I want to thank our panelists this evening. I especially want to thank the solicitor for taking time out of his busy schedule to be here, the sheriff for coming by, Chief Steward and your folks for being here. We'll be back here on October 26th, and I just heard from Chief Steward that there is the vigil for the fallen officers that same evening. Is that correct?
It's victims of crime.
Victims of Crime vigil, which will be at 6:30 that evening. So We're going to be here talking about gangs at 5:30. It is a smaller panel, so we may get out early so that if you want to take part in the vigil, you would have time to do that. I also want to thank Tom Allen and Representative Ann Thayer, who have in the past, they've worked with a task force around domestic violence. These are important things that we're talking about, and I appreciate you for coming out and realizing how important. Oftentimes lately, we say we want people, volunteers who want to make a difference. Well, I want to challenge you not to say, I want to make a difference. I want to challenge you to say, I want to make Anderson a different world. We can do that together. So thank you again for being here this evening, and please, this will not end when these 4 conversations end. It will just be the beginning of the work that we hope to do by engaging many within our community around opportunities to make sure that we are a safer community free of the crime and violence that we can prevent.